Welcome to Fish and Rice, Stories from Japan. I'm Toby.
I'm Andri.
And today we are welcoming Rory back on the show. Thank you for being our first repeat guest.
Good to be back. Thank you.
How have you been since our last discussion?
Oh, fabulous. It's warming up in Japan. Weather's beautiful. Flowers blooming.
Have you been back to the pachinko or?
I'm not ready to say that on camera.
All right.
So
today we are here to talk about a completely different topic.
Absolutely.
And you came to us a while back and we were just talking about travel plans in Japan, and you said you were going up somewhere with your car, and we're like, oh yeah, owning a car in Japan is awesome. And talking about it, we kind of quickly realized there's a lot to talk about owning cars in Japan. And since you own a car, we thought, well, let's talk about it with you. You can share your experience. So can you let us know a little bit about generally what was your experience owning a car in Japan, and then maybe we can dive into the different steps of getting there.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, having a car in Japan, it opens a lot of doors that are otherwise closed in terms of places that you can go.
True.
I mean, it being such a mountainous country, the public transport system is, of course, incredible in the cities. But as you get out into the more and more kind of depopulated outside areas, rural areas, you find that being able to go buy your own personal car just allows you to see a lot more easily parts of Japan that would otherwise be not closed to you, but certainly much more difficult to reach.
I was surprised still that even in like the most rural areas, you find bus lines, but they are very expensive. When you take those like very rural bus areas going to small villages, you pay like up to like $10-15 for a one-way bus ticket if you go all the way down the line. But also the timetable is very scarce, and if you miss whatever bus you need to take, you're basically stuck in the middle of nowhere. So having your own car is a big benefit.
A lot of places in the mountains, it's gotten down to like one bus per day, in and out.
Yeah,
and usually pretty early in the day, so it's easy to get stranded. And I mean, there's programs on TV here of trying to get
out of nowhere
place to place.
To somewhere.
Yeah, the bus Noritsugi Tabi program. I watch that a lot, which is like, it's really interesting, but it quite highlights like how hard it's getting in some areas to get around just on public transport.
So owning a car is a key to getting around that. And
Absolutely.
first step to owning a car probably and most obviously is you need a license, right? Can you tell us more about what is the process here in Japan to get a license, and perhaps more specifically coming from the outside, from overseas and with a foreign license?
Well, there's sort of a few different ways in, and which one you're able to do depends on which country you're from.
Okay.
For a variety of countries, not every country, but a couple dozen perhaps, which have, I suppose it's some sort of a treaty or agreement with Japan. You can just change your license into a Japanese.
So Japan has an agreement with like a select list of countries where they recognize that license from the other country, and they just ask you to basically translate it or transfer it to Japan. Okay.
Yeah, and there's a series of steps there. Like you say, you need to get a translation of your license made and then signed by a specific body, and they need to bring that to another place and get it stamped and take that to the police. And it's quite involved, but not terribly difficult, not particularly costly.
It's a lot of paperwork basically, right?
And the challenge is that like a lot of that's got to be done in Japanese, so there's not something you can easily do. There are companies out there that offer to do that service for people for a cost. They can do it on your behalf, but doing it on your own can be a bit of a challenge, and that's presuming you're from one of these countries that is able to do it.
So if you're not from one of those countries, I guess, I mean, we don't have the list, or you don't have the list from,
Not off the top of my
it's probably on some official website from the Japanese government. So if you're not from one of these like select countries, what do you need to do?
Well, basically, you have to get your license from scratch.
Okay.
And I don't know about it specifically. Apparently, there is a third group who the license is recognized, but you need to take a driving test, which can be 10 or 20,000 yen a time to take it.
That's about $200. Well, $188.
But somewhere in that area. And then if you basically pass the Japanese test without needing to write, I suppose, the theory part.
Okay.
But I couldn't say that for sure. I think it's probably, if it does exist, there's a very limited number. And then everyone else, and interestingly, the list of those who can't includes the United States, which...
Why is that?
Specifically, or the explanation I was given, because I did ask the police about it, I used a New Zealand license, which I had to make a Japanese license. But for the United States, there's not one national driver's license.
Oh, they split it by state.
Yeah, each individual state has its own licensing and its own requirements for the test. So while a lot of countries in the Commonwealth, a lot of countries in Europe have moved to like a graduated driver's license system, you get your learners, you get a restricted, you get a full license, things like that. Usually takes like 4 to 6 years. There are, I don't know how it is now, but state by state, there might be places that are like that, but there might be places, more rural out in the country where, at 16, you just get a slip of paper that's your driver's license and, you're away.
So Japan doesn't recognize that. And for people coming from the US, you still need to kind of go back through the stage of taking the test.
Yeah, because they can't make one kind of all-covering ruling about it. United States driver's license holders need to start from scratch.
You mentioned that for you, you did it from a New Zealand license, but you are from Canada originally. Yeah. Which process did you go through to get your license here in Japan?
I went through the simple exchange process, which is actually the second time I would have done it, because I went from a Canadian license back when I was just finishing high school, when I moved to New Zealand initially, and then eventually took that license and made another out of it here in Japan. So I had the most straightforward one, where you fill out the forms, you take it in, you take a picture, and they give you your license.
Okay, pretty straightforward. Absolutely. If you have all the forms in order,
you
right?
Do.
This is the trick.
Need that.
Make sure you check everything. So once you have the license, you can go out and drive.
Yeah.
Right. First thing you did was rent a car.
I did. I got my license, it was about January when I got it, and I was very eager to drive. But like a lot of people who do at last get their license in Japan, I'm not 100% sure, but I don't think you can do it right away. I think you need to have been in Japan for a certain amount of time. So most people haven't been driving for a year, 2 years, 3 years, and then they get their license in Japan, and it's a very different driving experience here.
How so?
Well, the roads are, especially in the city, are particularly modern and, definitely comparable to major city centers anywhere in the world. But I'd say the use of the road and the kind of general attitude of drivers is much similar to a lot of other places in like Asia or Southeast Asia. Like if you've ever been on the road in Vietnam and things like that, people do at sometimes just kind of go when they want to go where they want to go.
So it's like that outside of the cities in Japan as well?
I'd say it's a little easier outside of the cities, if anything, because, you do get onto these fairly narrow, mountainy dirt tracks that go up into the mountains, but you're scarcely likely to run into anyone on the road. And if you do, it's typically a case of somebody's got to back up until you get into the little cutout and let somebody pass. But, people drive pretty calmly and sedately out in the country because they're not really in a hurry to get anywhere. But the traffic is such a situation in the major city centers that everybody's just trying to get home as quickly as they can.
Yeah, if you live in the city, it doesn't really make too much sense to get a car unless you're out every weekend to go somewhere.
Yeah, exactly. And so, even then, you take the long way to avoid going through the center of town.
Where did you take your first car on a trip, or when you rented that car?
I rented a car about a month after getting my license and took it to a tourist area in northern Kyoto called Amano Hashidate, which is it's a little land bridge that basically cuts
looks like an island in the shape of a dragon, a little
dragon,
bit. Yeah,
they call it, that crosses a bay, basically on the coast of the Japan Sea. It was February, and there was no snow on the ground in the cities because this far south it scarcely ever
it doesn't snow much in Osaka.
A day. But little did I know that is not very representative of what it's like in the mountains that you have to cross to get there. So I was in a little K car with probably summer tires or maybe all seasons.
Could you just explain a little bit what exactly is a K car? How does it differ from a regular car?
Yeah. K cars have basically a 660cc engine in them and have pretty strict restrictions on how large the dimensions of the car could be. For those who don't know, they're the little cars with the yellow license plate that you see here.
So all cars in Japan with the yellow license plate are K cars.
Yeah.
And those cars are smaller with a smaller engine and have to fit specific dimensions.
Exactly.
Any advantage to such a small car?
I mean, besides the economy of it, in that the parts are cheaper, the tires are cheaper, you don't use that much gas, because in reality it's just a motorcycle engine, like a large displacement motorcycle engine that's powering your car. But also in terms of your taxes and a lot of the regular stuff, which we might have a chance to talk about later, you get a pretty big break from the government on all of those costs, because it's seen as kind of an economic and space-saving option. So they want to encourage people to have those cars.
Makes
so it's
sense.
the cheapest car to own in Japan.
And to rent.
And to rent.
And to cross the mountains with? Is that suited for mountain crossing?
Not advisable. Yeah. I was one of those, I really thought I was fine. You pass through the first tunnel. I've tunneled through all the mountains. And you get through, and there's a little bit of snow built up on the side of the road. And, there's still some snow here. And you pass through another tunnel. There's a little line of snow left over in the middle of the road. And I'm like, there's more snow in the mountains than I thought. And then third tunnel, and suddenly it's winter wonderland, and you're on these little ice skate K-car tires.
Not feeling very safe.
Not feeling particularly great.
But you made it back.
But I did. One of the most harrowing experiences and I've had, but felt good after getting back with everything. And so when I made the decision to buy, I immediately got a big 4-wheel drive.
Yeah. So what's the difference now for you, if you would say, between renting and owning? What made you jump into car ownership in Japan from just renting whenever you need one?
I'd say the amount of use that I wanted to have, and the kind of use cases that I wanted. I mostly, I do some snowboarding in the winter. I do some camping in the summer. So being able to take it up into the mountains, not worry about returning it. And also, this is something that, some other car YouTubers and stuff that have come to Japan, or that, make their content in Japan talk about, is that there's kind of an attitude towards cars here where it's more of an appliance than anything else. It's like a dishwasher, basically.
Interesting.
Like, you don't care that much if you get a scratch or a dent in your dishwasher at home, because it serves a purpose, and that's it. And then, when it gets too worn out to use, you're probably going to get another one, or just keep using it until it falls apart. So I have that same attitude where, I don't really care that much if I scratch my car, or if it's dirty, or,
it's made to be used. Yeah. Takes you from A to B and carries whatever you need to be carried.
It's a tool which gets me in and out of the mountains, basically. So having that, not having to worry about, insurance and deductible every time I rent a car, or...
and having 4-wheel drive?
Yeah, you can rent a 4-wheeler. I should say a 4-wheel drive vehicle here.
Probably, but in the lower range of prices, it will be one of those K cars you mentioned
ultimately,
earlier.
I don't know if I saved money or not by buying a car compared to renting when I needed one, but I think I reached a point where I just sort of wanted to own, and I thought in the near future I'm going to have enough of these cases of.
So having your license and the desire to get a car, how do you go about getting a car here in Japan? What's the process for maybe finding it, but also is there, I assume there's a lot of paperwork involved into like getting this legally to be able to use it without having any kind of issues with the police?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd say the major difference in the process from other parts of the world is the amount of paperwork that needs to be done.
A mountain, I imagine?
A mountain, certainly. But the first part, and I'd say this is much the same as anywhere else in the world, is going online and looking for the car that you want. I mean, there's Car Sensor is a big one. Here's probably the biggest online kind of amalgamated car searching that kind of brings from all these different car selling websites and smaller dealerships, list their cars on there, and you can search by make and model and car and year and all of the individual little options that might be on it, as well as the status of a variety of the little legal things in Japan, your registration, your warrant of fitness, things like that, to find exactly the one you want. And then once you've found that and seen that price, that's when you get into the nitty-gritty of the actual buying the car.
So you went through that exact same process to find your car?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I was on Car Sensor, and to kind of learn all of this stuff in the first place, I basically downloaded the full explanation of like how to buy a car off Car Sensor's blog, translated it for myself into a notebook, and then basically used that as a reference all the way through the process. But basically, once you've picked a car, you contact the dealer or the owner of that car and say like, okay, I'm interested. And the next step is usually going to see the car. And in that case, like inspecting a car elsewhere in the world, you kind of want to do a little bit of your homework beforehand to know what you should be looking for, like what kinds of things tend to wear out on this car, where are all the switches if you want to turn on all the hazard lights and all the signals to like make sure the bulbs are all fine or everything, where are those switches, where's the fuse box, all that stuff.
So you find your car, you go to inspect it, and you do your usual inspection. What if in this situation you don't know too much about cars, and perhaps most challengingly, if you don't speak Japanese?
I think part of the process, or part of the benefit of doing it in Japan, or the way it's done in Japan, is in the worst case scenario, there's somebody to do every step of the process for you. It just adds to the cost. So all of the registration and stuff that we might get a chance to talk about later is you can do it yourself. It's an involved process and there's a lot of paperwork. Or the dealership can do it for you. Or in some cases, you might also find a service which is basically a further middleman between you and the dealership. If you are completely unable to do any of the negotiation in Japanese or even at a basic level, you may need to find a dealership that is able to deal with you in English or in another language, or find a service that is able to do that negotiation on your part. And I mean, I didn't use any, but I know certainly from watching some car YouTubers and stuff like that who've bought cars from Japan and then exported them to their home country.
Also, they even do it from overseas and have everything done through an intermediary.
Or come to Japan and have basically somebody lent to them to go to places like the car auction houses in Yokohama or in Osaka, or to basically go to these car lots and have somebody to do that process, because legally the system for having a representative, sort of like a dairinin in Japan, is very well laid out. So you basically just need to sign a document which is basically swearing that somebody is your legal representative, and then they're able to do the whole process for you.
So if you don't speak Japanese and want to buy a car in Japan, there are ways around it, and you can find people to help you.
You need basically to find your interpreter, basically, through the process and appoint them as your representative. And I'm certainly there must be a niche in the market of people who are offering that service.
And in your case, though, you were able to do it by yourself. So you found this dealership online, you went there, you start doing your inspections. Yeah. What happens, and what happened for you?
Well, at that point, it's yes or it's no.
Okay. Can you negotiate at all?
On price and things like that, to explain that, you kind of need to get into what the price actually includes in Japan, because at the searching online step on places like Car Sensor and stuff, you will see two prices shown, a lower one and a higher one. The lower one is like hontai kagaku, the like body price of the car is usually.
So the actual physical price of the material you're buying.
The vehicle you're buying. And then the shiharai sogaku is the way the other one, like the total payment price, is usually how they write the larger one. And that includes like your first registration and your warrant of fitness inspections.
The paperwork.
And paperwork and all that stuff. So the lower of the two, the like body price of the car, you may be able to get some wiggle room on. Also, since like a lot of the dealerships are, or especially when you're buying used cars, it may not be a very large dealership. It may just be like a small,
just a man with a garage,
basically
or
a registered
woman with
mechanic.
a garage.
Yeah, a person with a garage and a car to sell. And you can do a bit of negotiation on having some like fixing done at the time of buying the car, which is again where kind of doing your homework about the car that you want is good ahead of time, because if they're eager to sell the car, they may be willing to do some minor maintenance for you at like a cheap price, or basically waive the cost of their labor or something to get the car out of the door if there's just kind of one loose thread that you want tied up before you finish the sale. So for example, in my case, I knew that the car I was purchasing, which is a Subaru Legacy wagon, has a couple of parts in it that tend to wear out around the 100,000 kilometer mark, and it was at 70,000 when I bought it. So I mean, like, didn't know then, like, am I really going to get 30,000 more clicks out of this? But so I asked the guy, hey, can you swap these if I buy this car today? And he was pretty eager to do it.
So you negotiated basically getting a few newer parts inside without
negotiate on
extra
the price, but I got a good deal on having a few things swapped just before we made it official. And then basically at that point you say yes, I want it, and they'll give you a quote first. Like most dealings that happen in Japan, you get your Mitsumori Sho, which is your quotation of the price. And if you agree to that, one thing you need to get ahead of time is, if you don't already have one in Japan, you need to register an official seal. Your name seal, a hanko, exactly. There's a few different kinds, but most what people get, at Don Quixote or the corner store, Daiso or whatever, is what's called a mitomein, which is basically just an acknowledgement seal. That's what you use for basic documents, your banking, receiving packages from couriers or the post office. But for like large binding legal contracts, you need an official, what they call jitsuin, like the real seal.
That you have to register
at your city office. So it's pretty easy. You just take it in and pay a small fee, and they print you a card and they give you a document with like a copy, basically a photocopy of like blown up what your seal looks like. And you can show that to the dealer and then stamp with your official seal to make it official. Just one word of warning is that how you write your name on the seal is important for foreigners with their legal name written either in English or Roman characters, or in some language other than kanji. You can't use Japanese, Chinese kanji characters for your seal.
Okay, so it has to be in Roman letters
for
your
katakana
jitsuin
seal. They won't accept it even if you primarily use that, unless you've gone through the process of
having
making it your
changed.
Official name in Japan and getting that on your residence card if you have a Zaidu card, and that's a whole other complicated process. So if you have not gone through that, make sure you have a seal that you're ready to make your jitsuin, which is either in basically English Romaji letters or in katakana, or they won't let you register it. I mean, usually there's a hanko place across the street from every city office, just kind of living in that niche for people who need one. So that was my case as well. I've been using basically just characters that a friend chose for me years ago for like my mitomein seals for the whole time. And then I went in like, yeah, it's my name, look. And they said, no, that's very cute, but go make another.
Okay, so you stamped your paper with your official seal,
you stamp, and then
the car validated.
They will you basically just need to then pay by a certain date. And if you have decided to do any of the registration process on your own, you need to also have that done before the handover date. So included in that larger price, what you add to the body price of the car, there are a variety of services where there are legal costs, things like your first automobile tax, your like legal inspection, your shaken. Then there are also things which the dealership or car seller may be doing on your behalf, which includes registering it in the place that you live.
Okay.
Which I would recommend letting them do. You can do it yourself, but it is compared to the other parts, it is an incredibly involved process, which involves also knowing the details of the previous owner of the car. So like, unless you're doing, like a swap on, Japanese Craigslist or something like that. I don't think there is Craigslist in Japan, but Jimoti, there's the equivalent of Japanese Craigslist or Facebook Marketplace or something. I would recommend letting.
So it's easier if the dealer handles most of the paperwork for you.
Yeah. And they will charge you at most, couple $100 for the service and save you a huge headache. But there are other things like you need to have registered your parking space with the police in the place that you live.
I read about this, and it needs to be within 2 kilometers of where your house or residence is located.
Yeah, exactly. And you need to have, the legal permission to use it. So if you're renting an apartment and you're going to use the parking at the apartment place, you'll need to go to basically the company that manages your apartment, which is usually as simple as going to the place, like the apartment shop that you rented it from in the first place, and they can
give you that document.
Again, they may charge you some like small fee for that, usually a couple thousand yen at most, to stamp it to say like, yes, this person's living there. Yes, they've agreed to lease this.
No paperwork is free.
Yeah, exactly. Then you hand all of that in to the police with another small contribution to their humble cause, and then stick basically a sticker on the back of your car that says like, I have a place to park this.
Okay.
And you will need to prove that you've done that process to the dealership before handing over the car. They can also do it on your behalf. Like, all of this can be done for you if you're willing to pay the price, basically.
Did you choose to let them do everything?
No, I did parking registration myself.
Okay.
That's pretty straightforward if you can manage the paperwork. And then basically all that remains is waiting for the handover. After that point,
you're officially the owner of the car.
You are officially the owner, and the dealership will be taking care of anything that remains, like the legal inspection, your shaken, all of that. If it needs to be done, it's possible to buy a car that still has some time on its previous inspection left, like other places in the world. It has, like it's called Regio, or it's called WAF, or what, depending on where you are in the world. It has a different name.
Just a regular car inspection.
It might
to make
have
sure
6 months or a year left on it, in which case you won't need to pay it. But when it runs out, you'll need to deal with that yourself. But in either case, you're going to end up doing it eventually. So if there's anything left to be done, the dealership will be handling it, and then you pick the day and you take it. You can also elect to have the car delivered to you somewhere once it's ready.
That's convenient.
Yeah. Again, that will cost you something. Which that's mostly only done when people are buying a vehicle from outside of the area that they're living in. I mean, like a pretty significant distance, like in a prefecture, like the particular make and model you want is only in Yokohama, but you live in Hiroshima, like 8 hours drive away. You're not going to take the Shinkansen up and then drive it back, probably. You could. So it's a nice drive. I've done that drive, but wouldn't recommend it unless you're really into that sort of thing and you want to break in your car as soon as you've got it. You can pay for them to deliver it to you. You may also pay a little bit extra because they have to do the registration in a different municipality from where the car is. So it's just these little things that add up. By the way, on the quote that you get from them, from the person selling the car, I should say, you need to make sure that everything on it is itemized. That's one like antitrust legal thing here in Japan, where some places, if they're trying to pad the bill, will have like everything under like a general expenses column and be like, it's this, that, and the other thing.
Them to break it down for you, and like this cost is for this cost is for this. And
so if you happen to get a quote from a dealer that's got anything like that, where it's all kind of bunched together and not this much for this service and this much for this service, you may be dealing with like a shady dealer, and you should think about maybe getting your car somewhere else.
So from all your experience now going through these steps and doing the paperwork, dealing with how would you say is the Japanese used car market compared to maybe where you've lived before, New Zealand and Canada? Is it similar?
That's a good question. I never went into purchasing so much in Canada because I was still basically a teenager when I left, but the buying a car process in New Zealand, at least, it's not as involved. I think you end up taking care of a lot of it yourself afterwards. Like the one time I was involved in any of that was basically going to the car lot. They show you the car, you go on a test drive, and then basically like you agree to pay, they set up financing, and you drive it away.
Can you test drive the car here in Japan?
That's a good question. Sometimes no.
Interesting.
Especially for used cars. If it still has legal registration and shaken left on it, yes. The problem is your mandatory third-party liability insurance, which pretty much every country has, which is like the minimum required insurance for if you cause an accident, it covers the injuries to other people. Without that, you can't legally drive in Japan.
So if the car has been up for sale for too long and that insurance expired, you're not even allowed to take it out.
If your shaken has expired, you don't have like legal right to use it on the road. You don't have any insurance. So typically used car sellers won't let you do a test drive.
So that means you also need to take care of getting that before taking it out of the lot.
Yeah. Or in that case, you're kind of taking a bet that, it's not going to be. There is like a cooling down period in Japan. I think it's 7 days. I want to say after signing after signing a major contract, you're like legally allowed to back out of it without any penalty.
If you cannot drive your car,
for about a week. So if you end up with a complete lemon and you weren't able to test drive it, like you have a little bit of legal leeway to get out of that contract and give it back, but they will, like, up to and including everything they're able to do, they'll be happy to show you. At least most like honest places, like you can, turn it on. They're happy to leave it running for as long as you want to listen for, knocks and weird noises in the engine. You might be able to convince the dealership owner or whoever's selling the car to drive it around the block with you in the passenger seat, maybe. I don't know where that sits legally, but it's if the registration is run out on the car, you shouldn't expect to be able to test drive it.
Makes sense.
Keep that in mind when buying. Yeah.
Where did you take your car once you got it? First place you went to?
First place I went, I actually took it on a big trip. I mean, first thing I did was try to find my way home using only road signs.
Without GPS?
Yeah, because I bought it in Amagasaki, which is like most of the way to Kobe from Osaka. And with navigation, it would probably be an hour drive back at most. I mean, about 90 minutes later, I was not much closer to figuring out where I was supposed to be. I think I got as far as Shinomamiya, which anyone who knows Osaka knows that is like, the roughest part of town, and was sort of like, I took a wrong turn at Albuquerque. But fortunately from there, because I know where geographically in Osaka that is, I was able to kind of orient myself and get going back in the right direction, and then get through Moriguchi and back to where I was trying to go.
And then the big road trip. For that one, you planned a little bit more, or did you just take it with the road signs?
I took it down to Kyushu. I used Nav. I mean, I mostly use Google Maps for navigation in Japan because I bought a car that quite uncommonly here in Japan doesn't have a nav system in it.
Interesting. Now I see all of the new cars have like a screen on board with like the integrated GPS system.
I got nothing except a mini disc player, which I had to buy a mini disc burner from a Second Street in order to burn mini discs to have music in my car.
So you bought an older model?
It's a 2007. So it was 12 years old when I bought it. It's 16 years old now.
It's been on the roads. How was Kyushu with the car? How did it feel? Was it worth it?
Yeah, no, that the trip was incredible. I drove it basically up to Tottori and then down along the coast to Kitakyushu and then down through Kumamoto and then Beppu Onsen and back up through Hiroshima and then basically home. And then in typical fashion, as happens whenever I try to go on holidays, a typhoon came and spoiled everything. But
how was that?
no, I mean, I was in a big heavy wagon, so there was no trouble on the road, but I went camping was the idea. So I brought camping gear and my, at that time, fiance in the car with me. And if I were to do it again, I would have made more stops, taken more days, and basically just reduced the amount of driving every day. Because I wasn't on the expressways.
The small roads take a long time.
One thing about the expressways, they're so fast, but cost-wise, I mean, if you have multiple people in the car, it's pretty like cost-effective. But if it's just the two of you, it's not that much different from taking the express trains and like road buses. Well, faster than the buses, but Shinkansen is much faster and not that much more expensive. So yeah, I made the plan to go on the low roads and stop at a campsite every night and camp and do this big, I think it was about 2,000 kilometer.
That's a big loop.
Circuit of southern Japan. But ended up like kind of 6-7 hours of driving every day. And then like it takes a lot of time to set up and break down camp anyway. And if you want to be stopping and seeing things along the way, you're basically pitching a tent in the dark every night, sleeping 6 hours and waking up and doing it again the next day. So it was an incredible trip, but a little bit labor intensive for like a holiday.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's the sort of thing you can do only if you have a car. So as far as an experience to have, it was a great road trip.
What are some other places that you've been to where you've only been able to go to because you've had a car?
Going up to the mountains for skiing, snowboarding is a big one. Obviously, you can get everywhere, or you can at least get somewhere where you can have a terrific ski experience in Japan without a car. I mean, Nagano is like a very comfortable express train trip from either Tokyo or Nagoya. You can go from there. That's very easy to get to on the train, and there's shuttle buses everywhere. So that's no problem. If you wanted to go to like Niseko up in Hokkaido, again, take the Shinkansen or even fly into what's the airport up there in Sapporo called? I can't remember. Sapporo Airport.
Sapporo Airport.
We'll call it that. And then take buses or trains up there. It's totally fine. But I have a personal family friend who has a place up in Gunma Prefecture, which is sort of that triangle of Niigata, Nagano, and Gunma, the kind of Yukiguni snow country area. Like the least built up of those three is probably Gunma. It's still just, mountains and trees and rivers and little villages and stuff up there. And getting up there in the middle of winter when it's, snowy and you gotta climb, a 30-degree dirt
slope
track up into the mountains, having a 4-wheel drive wagon with snow tires on it was, really the only way I could see that having happened. So having made that trip, that's probably the furthest north I think I've taken my car. The other fun thing you can do is get on a ferry, basically.
Oh, cool.
Because there's lots of little islands in the Seto Inland Sea. Probably the largest of which is Shodoshima.
Shodoshima, Teshima as well is quite large.
There's Ogijima and Meijima, I don't remember, but all those little islands. But having your own car, especially on Shodoshima, is perfect because it's just small enough that you can do basically everything in a day.
If you have a car.
If you have a car. Otherwise, like you said, you have like one bus a day that's going to take you out to the place you want to see. You want to go up to the cable car, like you have to plan very specific times around when the bus is going to be there, when it's going to be back. Maybe you have to, like kill an hour here and there just waiting for the next bus to come. The sun goes down and basically you're stuck in your hotel without any possibility to go anywhere. Whereas, yeah, like having your car, you could very easily do a circuit and see it all.
What would you say now that you have initially like rented cars and now are car owner have been the advantages of owning over renting? Because I assume like all the locations you've just mentioned, well, they're only accessible by car, but you don't need to own the car.
Yeah,
that takes you there.
You could rent, especially if it's for individual trips. For those particular trips, not caring about the condition of the car. I mean, like I said, my car is a 2007. It's got, 70,000 clicks when I bought it. It's about 130,000 now.
Good amount.
Yeah, somewhere in that area. God,
it's true. If you rent a car, you always need to. Well, I rent cars here, and one of the main annoyances I have is you always need to bring it back before a certain time.
Fill it up, all that sort of stuff.
Yes. So
and you're concerned about you get a little scratch on the wing mirror, and that's going to probably cost you a couple $100 deductible.
Oh yeah, that much
when you return it. And that's if if you bought the best insurance package along with it, then that's another 2,000 yen every time, and then maybe you can ding it here or there and not have a problem. But for me, my wagon is just a tool that gets me places. So
like the appliance analogy you made earlier. It's
exactly
just
where
a tool.
You can be in a couple feet of snow, God knows what's under it. You come back from the mountains in Gunma and you're just like streaked down the side, and there's a new dent here and something there that must have happened somewhere along the way, but you don't really care. You go to Don Quixote and you get the same color of touch-up paint and do it all again next year. So yeah, for the big trips, not having to worry so much about
the time.
Yeah, your car. For people who are looking to have a car as a showpiece here in Japan, obviously that's not going to be the same advantage. They want to go to car shows. Clearly, they're going to care about the condition of their car. But if it's a tool for getting around, being able to beat it up a little bit and not worry about it too much is a great thing about having a used car. And for day-to-day use,
I was going to ask, because we talked a lot about the trips and the places to go, but
my
owning
trips
the
are
car
probably less than a quarter of the miles I've put on the car.
So how has it impacted your daily life?
Shopping is a big thing. Going to Costco. I would own a car just for the weekly. No, honestly, I would rent a car for the Costco run, but it does kind of defeat the purpose of going to Costco if all of your savings are getting
into the car spending
eaten up by renting a car. But being able to go for things like that, and also for a long time, I was dating someone who I'm now married to, who is living in Kyoto at the time, and I'm in Osaka, and geographically that's not a big distance. It's 25 kilometers tops, which is that's some people's
it depends where you are, but
that's a short commute in the US or Canada. So but being able to go and pick her up after work, things like that, and drive us home,
so kind of sense of freedom,
and have that time kind of in the car moving, where you're in a comfortable seat. You're working because you're driving, but you can be talking, you can listen to whatever music you want. You don't have some sweaty businessman sitting next to you falling asleep on your shoulder. The traffic really does get me riled up sometimes, but that's a car.
It can be slow. If you're in rush hour, you get stuck in traffic everywhere.
That's your fault for getting in your car and driving at 5 p.m. So having that ability to make those little trips back and forth, and I found people also, because car ownership is not really that widespread. So when people know you as the person that has a big wagon that can carry stuff around,
they'll ask for favors.
But as you might know, if you know anything about borrowing culture in Japan, every time you do somebody a favor, you're gonna get paid
something
back,
in return,
in
one way or another,
in spades. So everybody owes you, and you have that always in your back pocket. Moving was a big one. A couple of years ago, I moved apartments, and I did rent a truck for part of the move, but for like all the smaller stuff, I just did lots of little runs.
So saving money there on the move. And
oh yeah, I mean that alone, considering how much moving costs in Japan sometimes, probably paid for the car. Just being able to move myself without having to hire a moving company.
So let's talk about the cost actually a little bit. We talked a lot about the advantages of having it, going to places, adventures, and daily life being more comfortable. But of course, owning a car comes at a cost. There's a cost of purchase that you have, but maintenance, fees, taxes. Is it really worth it financially to own a car in Japan?
You won't be saving money. That's the big thing. I mean, trains cost money, buses cost money, but all things considered, you'll be spending more than you otherwise would by owning a car. I mean, I think that's pretty much to be expected most places. But
what will be some of the main fees you have to consider before purchasing a car?
I'd say once you own the car, there's the cost that you're then saddled with for as long as you own it. The largest of which are your car tax, your basically kuramaze is the way they mostly say it here, which is a yearly thing. Basically, it arrives in the mail in May. Just one of the typical little things that you take to the konbini or
the
red
envelope. Pay this before the due date.
Actually, I think it's one of the peel ones now. That peel it open and pay that. Depending on the displacement of your car, it's a different amount. For mine, which is a 2-liter, it's which over 12 years, it goes up in cost as the car gets older.
Because it is less environmentally friendly.
It's an emissions thing. Mine is 45,000 yen a year. And that comes in May. And usually, it's set up now. You can also do it in part payments if you want. And you can pay in cash at the Bini, or you can... I think there's a website for it now, finally. You can use your credit card and do like revolving payments or whatever you want if you can't pay that lump sum like all at once. So that's pretty straightforward, but that's coming every single year. Again, if you have one of those K cars, it will be like
much lower.
It's a pittance for K cars. It's very, very little.
What other costs you have to factor in? Parking, perhaps? You mentioned you need to
parking,
have a parking.
Obviously, you're scarcely likely to have free on-road
space is limited in Japan.
Anywhere. So. Yeah, it's not like just park it on the sidewalk in front of your house. There is no sidewalk. You don't have a front yard. You basically need to be renting either a place at the building you live at. You need to live in a house that has a parking space already as a part of your property, or you need to go to one of those big public car lots that sells, like a monthly cost.
What are the average costs for Osaka, for example?
Yeah, for Osaka in the city, anywhere from 20 to 40 a month. Which
40,000 yen, so that's
40,
about $200 to $400.
Yeah, you could find it less depending on the place. If it has a roof, if it doesn't have a roof, it has a guard. If it doesn't have a guard, those all factor in. You can find it as low as probably 10,000. And outside of the city, like Osaka Prefecture, but the minor municipalities surrounding it, you'd be looking at more like 8,000 to 10,000 yen a month.
But if you're in other cities like Tokyo, can be much more expensive.
Tokyo can be just quite simply eye-watering. I think my sister-in-law pays more a month for parking than I pay for my entire
apartment rent.
My apartment.
Wow.
It can be like $1,000 US a month to park your car.
So these are all costs to factor in and that you need to be aware of.
Yeah, you will be paying that every month. So before thinking about it, it's good to look at like how much money do you typically have left over at the end of the month. If that were to disappear completely and be eaten up by your car, are you still going to be comfortable? Are you going to be able to live?
So owning a car, definitely not saving money, but winning some certain degree of freedom.
Yeah.
But you have to do the math. You have to do the research, prepare your paperwork, make sure your license is in order, make sure you get a car in good condition, and get the paperwork right. Enjoy your car, but plan your costs.
Yeah, enjoy it, and I mean, use it, because like you said, there's
tool.
The big... there's those big costs, and the last one is your car inspection, your shop-in.
Every 2 years?
You can get it for a shorter period. I have seen sometimes 3 years, but I think that's like very specific conditions. Like your first shaken, you can do for 3 years or something like
So
that.
if the
But
car's brand new,
yeah.
3 years is fine.
typically, I think it's 1 or 2 years. I always do 2, and that's another kind of big financial hit that
Yeah.
comes all at once.
Yeah, certainly it's 1 month savings gone into just getting
yeah.
your car inspected.
Whereas the cost of shaken itself, the inspection is typically pretty cheap, 10 or 20,000 yen, but there are a variety of things that come with that, where everything that needs to be changed or fixed or everything they find needs to be done then, before they will give you the next warrant of fitness, which in my case for the wagon, I think my last shaken was 120,000. So
a bit more than
12.
$1,000.
yeah, 1,200, a little bit less than that.
So
USD.
ultimately, was it worth it for you to get the car?
For me, I'm still glad I got the car.
So when that car is like, when it's done,
yeah,
you'll get a new one to make sure you can keep enjoying it.
yeah,
the way-
I think I would consider,
Not going back to the no car life.
yeah, considering. And I mean, I've known people who've had one for a while, but ultimately made the financial decision, like the cost that they initially thought was all right, or the use they had. You know, maybe they have kids and they're not going to the mountain as much anymore, so they don't need a big 4x4 to go up in the mountains. Some people downgrade to a K car. They can put a car seat in, it's easier to park, and some people just get rid of their car for a while. I mean, there's no real disadvantage to selling, except that big lump fee that you pay when you buy the car. You've got to pay again once you get back in the market.
Toby, are you buying a car?
Maybe I'm thinking about it. Maybe, like you said, it's a big financial decision, but the advantages of going to the mountains, going on road trips are very tempting, and maybe facilitating daily life. But right now I live in a city center, relatively city center, so
Pretty
there's
expensive parking.
no real advantage right now of having a car. Thank you, Rory, for sharing your stories. I'm sure there's many more things we can talk about cars, but Henry has a few questions for us.
Okay.
Yes, we have a trivia segment. This
Okay.
is for you. The answer to trivia question is a number, and let's just jump into it. When did Japan start driving on the left, or when was the first official documented law or paper posted or released that people
Why do they
were
do that?
forced to walk or drive on the left?
Well, okay. Is it walk or is it drive? Because I feel like the answer would be very different depending.
Okay, let's say drive.
Drive. Because I think the walking answer is like already Edo Jidai or earlier, because carrying swords. I think there was another short about that. The scabbards clacking together and people cutting each other's heads off if they walk on the right.
That makes sense.
Because they wear it on the left hip, and if you bump a guy with your scabbard, well, now you got to fight for your life. So,
I would say 18. I'm not gonna.
You can write it down first, so no cheating.
No cheating.
yeah.
Okay.
Well,
So Rory, what's your
It said
answer?
1871.
Me too.
1871.
Meiji
If it's
Revolution.
18,
Can you
basically.
explain?
Well, Meiji Revolution, right?
1868 was
68.
was technically the Meiji restoration, but I figure it would take them a couple of years to get around to something like road code and things like
So
that.
change from the Edo period to the Meiji period, wanting to just change everything, and some
Yeah.
industrialization happening. So probably a
I
good
think
time to
it would
switch.
have taken a couple of years for the switch to happen.
The data that I have is 1872.
Oh,
Which is
So
one year, but both
close.
are wrong. But first official document that remains now is 1902.
1902.
That explicitly states that cars have
Yeah.
to drive on the left.
Vehicles have to
Okay.
be on the left.
Question
But,
number 2.
yeah. Question number 2. How many kilometers of expressways are there in Japan?
Wow, expressways.
Yeah, they're a big deal here. A lot of them. They're expensive. How many of them are there? How many kilometers? What would you think?
I know the distance of the expressway from Osaka to Tokyo. If I use that a measurement, and
He's
think.
doing too much math.
Yeah,
I just
It's
wrote
gotta
down
be
a
like
number.
grid, mostly.
Maybe
Okay.
he can get closer to the actual answer by thinking. Okay, Rory?
Hold on. Give me a second.
You're doing the math.
And then add. How many zeros?
We need an answer.
How many zeros is that? It
3,
needs 2 zeros.
2,
okay. I'm
1.
gonna double it. 20,000 kilometers.
20,000 kilometers?
I have
probably?
28,000.
28 what?
28,000.
28,000.
Not 28 kilometers. That will barely be. 28,000 kilometers.
It's 10,000 kilometers.
Oh, I
Wow.
knew it. I was gonna say 10.
Really?
Yeah, because I thought
I was imagining a lot more. 10,000.
it's 600
interesting.
kilometers from Osaka. I shouldn't have changed my answer. It's 600 kilometers from Osaka to Tokyo, and I figure there's about 6 of that distance from Japan, but it's sort of a grid there and there. So I figure there's probably that many wide as well. So if you take like 600 times 6, you get like 3,600 times about 3 wide would be about 10,000 worth of like grid.
So you were
Too
closer in your
much.
mind,
In the
but
last
Too
second, I was
much
like,
math.
"Oh, it's too low."
overthinking.
Too
Okay,
much math. for
last
me.
question. How many registered vehicles are there in Japan?
I know that 40% of them are K cars, but
There's a good factoid.
I do not know how many registered vehicles. We have 127 million people living here, I think. About now. So majority of the population is older. So registered vehicles.
Yes. It can be also probably like buses and
Oh,
cars and motorcycles, I would guess.
well, I don't know. I'll just try this. Rory, do you have an answer? Oh, he's doing math again.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
If 1 in 6, I want to say 15 million vehicles.
15 million vehicles, Toby.
I'm gonna change my answer and I'm gonna say 40 million.
40 million. It's 82 million.
No, I had 80 million. I have it written down.
You can't
Why
change
did
your
I
Why did
answer.
you
change?
change
You
that?
can't change your answer.
Well, because his number was so low and he did math, and I was like, that my number maybe is way too high. But
Really? There's like
yeah.
Google gave me
One-
82 million.
Well,
That's
this
a
was
lot,
interesting,
every
yeah.
2 people.
A lot of
And
cars.
all registered.
Every 2?
Yeah, because 130
Yeah,
million,
it's
give or
a little
take.
bit more than half. So like 60% of population has a car.
Yeah, I
registered.
mean, there's a lot of like work cars.
Yeah.
and trucks and all
Yeah,
that. sort of
buses,
vehicles on the
trucks,
road,
probably motorcycles also. I
True.
think it's like all of the vehicles that have a number plate on them.
okay.
So it might be
Well, there you go.
yeah, 82 million. It's
Well,
still
No.
more than
That's the
Thank
lesson of the
you
day.
for the-
Don't change your first answer.
Yeah, don't change your first answer. Thank you for all the interesting facts. Thank you, Rory, for sharing so much of your experience with us. And I hope that some of our listeners considering maybe getting a car in Japan, getting a license in Japan, renting, have gotten some very useful information out of it, and may consider some of your travel tips down to Kyushu, up to the mountains of Gunma.
Great.
Thank you, everyone, for listening. This was Fish and Rice Stories from Japan, and we'll see you again next week with a new episode. Bye.
Bye.